Product Stacks is brought to you by Storyblock, one of the world's fastest growing headless CMSs. A headless CMS like Storyblock separates the back end from the front end. By moving to an API-based CMS like Storyblock, you can publish your content to any front end, whether that's your marketing website or directly inside your product. Developers love Storyblock because they can use it with any front-end framework they prefer and create components that can be reused anywhere as content blocks, cutting development time in half. Content teams are excited about the discussions feature built directly into Storyblock's visual editor. No more Slack or email threads to discuss content changes. Join 86,000 developers plus companies like Harvard Business School, Adidas, Netflix, Oatly, and Pizza Hut who all use Storyblock by trying a free demo at storyblock.com/department of product. Go to storyblock.com/department of product. That's Storyblock with a K at the end /department of product. Joining us today on Product Stacks is Vishal Kapoor, and Vishal is the Director of Product at Shipt. Welcome, Vishal. Thanks for joining us today.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Richard.
As always, we thought we could kick off with a little bit of an introduction as to who you are, and also a little bit about Shipt as well, because I know that Shipt is pretty big in the US, but for folks who are listening outside of the US, we thought a little bit of context around that would be great as well.
So I'll start with me first. I'm originally from India, from Mumbai. I came to the US for graduate school. Then I started working for, one of the biggest marketplaces, Amazon, as an engineer.
Right.
From there, I started working for search. I worked for Microsoft Bing, Yahoo Search. Then I moved into gaming. So there is a company called Zynga, which makes social games.
Okay.
If you remember Farmville.
Yeah, Farmville was huge for a little while, wasn't it?
Yes, it was huge for a little while. Zynga was the original company that the creators of Farmville. And I ended up working on a social game called Words with Friends, where you're playing words with your friends and family. It's very popular around the holidays. Essentially, you're playing Scrabble on the phone with other people. I was there for 7 years, but as a product manager over the last couple of years, where I was with Words with Friends, we released a new version of the game. And we were able to take that new version of the game to the number one app on both App Store as well as Google Play Store. So it was number one for about 2 weeks, not a long time, but that was an incredible, thrilling moment for any product manager to have worked on something that was number one in the world for a short period of time, right? So that was where I really got my product chops. I transitioned from being an engineer into being a PM. And then from there, my other major experience was another company which currently only operates in US and Canada, a ride-sharing company called Lyft. It's a big competitor of Uber here in the US. So you can hail rides on Lyft. I worked there as part of the marketplace team, and I worked on some problems related to pricing rides. And from there, then now I'm at Shipt, where two of the big products that I own. So one of them is similar to Uber Pool, which is somebody's going from point A to point B. How do you actually give them more jobs or bundle jobs? And the second thing is Shipt is a gig company like Uber, like Lyft, like DoorDash. It is a gig economy based company. And the second big product that I own is called Earnings, which is how do we pay the people who come and work for our platform? So, hundreds of millions of dollars every year is dispersed through our platform. You can argue that people come and work for these gig companies because they are looking for a parallel income. So we provide that source of income, and our team, our products that we own have all these different systems for search pay, for dynamic pay, for something called base pay, which is when you choose to do a job, what do you actually get paid for that job, for example. So whatever dollars go into the pockets of the people who come and work for us, my team actually deals with every dollar that actually goes into their pocket. So a lot of power, a lot of responsibility type of a position, and stress, but it's also a lot of fun. A very, very thrilling place to be in. Just quickly, Shipt is a three-sided marketplace. You may have heard of Instacart, maybe, or at least Uber.
Yes.
So these are three-sided marketplaces, right? Which means that you want to order something on Uber Eats. Let's say you place an order. You are the customer. The restaurant where you're placing the order from is your retailer or your partner. And the third is the person who's fulfilling the order for you. So Shipt is similarly a three-sided marketplace, but it's mostly concentrated on grocery deliveries. Right? It's not specifically for restaurant deliveries. It's for deliveries in general. So grocery shopping is one big use case where if you place a grocery order, somebody will actually go into the store, shop the order for you, come and deliver it to your doorstep. So I'm a director of product. I have a team. I work on the shopper side. That's what Shipt is about.
And so does Shipt power the overall the end-to-end user experience? So if I'm a customer, would I be ordering the groceries themselves via the Shipt app, or does it act as like a back end, almost like an API that other people can feed and piggyback off?
It's
Or is it
both.
both? Okay.
It's both. Yeah. So somebody like you could come to the Shipt app, just like you could go to an Amazon.com and you could place an order directly with us. You would be choosing the store where you want the order to be shopped
Right.
from,
Yeah.
where you would say, I just want milk, eggs, so on and so forth. And Shipt will take care of everything else. So it's that, but also we can be embedded, like you said, into third-party websites. By the way, for more context, Shipt is acquired by Target.com, and Target.com is
Right.
is one of the largest e-commerce companies in the US. We own and operate independently, but we are their acquisition. So Target.com, for example, will allow their customers to place orders on Target.com, but they could be fulfilled by Shipt. So we would be like sort of the fulfillment provider. And we have other partners where we integrate with as well.
It's such an interesting world, isn't it? Like same day delivery and on-demand delivery. I actually spent myself a brief amount of time in this space as well. I used to work for a UK London-based startup called Shuttle, which was acquired by eBay, and then subsequently worked at eBay. And the Shuttle proposition was quite similar, actually. So we would connect with with big retailers, and we would allow third parties to integrate via the APIs, and we would literally allow anyone on a bicycle or a motorcycle to become like a shuttle driver. Right. And then that would power, as you were saying about the Target.com example, that would then power some of the e-commerce checkout options that you might get for delivery. But it's extremely, I was only working in it for a very, very short amount of time, but it's an extremely complex industry
and competitive space.
Yeah.
You're
Right. This
Yeah.
was like this was nearly 10 years ago, 2016. So since then, this has come on, a
long
amount. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. I think the thing that entices me about working for on-demand marketplaces, right? Things like these, where you can push a button and some service is fulfilled for you. Like I told you, I work for Search, I work for Amazon, I work for other e-commerce companies. When I was at Lyft, I could push a button in an app and a car would actually physically come and pick me up. So that the intersection of technology and your real life is so like tangible. You see like how long will it take for a car to come pick you up? It actually comes, it picks you up, it gets your job done. Versus working for a search engine for me was that you write some code, you should deploy it in the cloud. It impacts billions of people, but here it's more like you push a button, a car will come, different car might come to you, depending on the code changes that your teams make, for example. It's a lot more fulfilling and satisfying for me to work in this space.
Perfect. Okay, so let's take a look then at your product stack. And as I said at the start, this is a little bit different given that you're in a leadership position. And we're going to kick off by thinking about what attributes you might consider when you're evaluating or when you're hiring product managers. So I think you've got some thoughts to share about how you might approach that as a leader.
In terms of the attributes that I use to evaluate product managers, I would say, Richard, it's not just that I'm looking for these qualities in others when I'm hiring them. It's also the qualities that I like to model in myself.
Yeah.
These are the 4 things that I'm always looking for. I feel that the people who are exceptional shine in all 4 of these areas. So for me, number 1 is strategic planning. Second is accountability. Third one is being able to communicate. And fourth one is being able to collaborate with other people or being likable or being able to influence other people. So I'll go one by one. So what is strategic planning? I think it's a broad bucket where you need to be very rational and data driven. Take your subjective opinions out of the way. I think we should do this. Take all of that out of the way and actually try to look at feedback, talk to customers. So strategic planning for me is being data oriented. You derive your strategy using data, and plans is basically your vision, how you're actually doing it. So that's how I kind of club those 2 qualities together into strategic planning. The second is accountability. Accountability is fairly straightforward. The way I like to foster that culture in my PMs, the way I phrase it is, let's say you're running a restaurant, right? What kind of accountability would you have if you were to make changes in the menu, if you were to make changes in the layout of the restaurant, if you were to change how the restaurant operates? You are the only person who's really responsible. And if you are the owner, the people who are working in the restaurant, their lives and their work is directly impacted by the way you make decisions. So operate with that level of accountability. Buck stops with you ultimately, right? You are not the one who's potentially running the kitchen. You're not the chef. You're not the servers. You're not manning the cash register. There are people doing that for you, but you are the one who's responsible for taking decisions of the layout of the restaurant, what gets served, when does it open, when does it close. So the buck actually stops with you. So if you were the owner of this product, what kind of accountability would you bring to the table? That hold yourself personally accountable. What I like to tell people is when you really operate like that, you stop doing garbage work. There's a lot of filler work that people can do to kill their time. They would do project management and they would do this and they would do that. I like to remind my PMs that I hire that I want product managers to not be farmers. I want them to be hunters. So it's your job as a product manager to go and find these diamonds in the rough. Find these big ideas which will actually move the needle for the company. Just don't do incremental bookkeeping work like project management, etc. You do it if it is the need of the hour. But what I mean by accountability is whatever decisions you make, they will actually impact the livelihoods and the well-being of the people that work with you. So operate with that sense.
For something like accountability, let's imagine that you're hiring for a PM role. How would you assess whether someone is accountable? Are there any questions that you might ask, or are there any certain examples that you might be looking for? Any kind of signals from the person? How do you assess something like accountability?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's no real science in hiring somebody. It is a subjective decision that you're making, but you would ask situational questions. You would ask somebody, for example, tell me about a time when something went wrong, your biggest failure. You could have done better. Those questions are where you're trying to suss out and see whether somebody self-aware enough to admit that they made a mistake. Everybody makes mistakes. That's how we learn. They are willing to take accountability. That I made a mistake. I learned from that mistake. I grew as a person. There is one round, which is leadership interview, where you are asking these type of questions and trying to see what answers the candidates come up with.
Perfect.
Third one is fairly obvious. As a business leader, you need to have good communication skills. You need to be able to influence other people. Collaboration is an interesting one. Even at Lyft, there were 3 core values. And one of the core values was we win together. It's not me versus you. It's us versus a problem in our jobs. It's full of highly accomplished, highly skilled intellectuals. And a lot of us have our own ideas and our own egos. And it is a competitive environment. But especially for newer product managers, the one thing to keep in mind is that ideas are important, but ideas change. Like think about crypto. Crypto world is going through its own upheavals right now, for example. So if you are a PM in crypto, you could be a PM for something else tomorrow, right? Ideas will change. But what will be constant is the people that you work with. So that skill of being likable, that skill of getting along with other people, that to check your ego at the door, when you are trying to convince somebody, getting into arguments, don't try to win arguments only on intellectual points, but always remember that you are dealing with people and people are imperfect.
Yeah.
So I think I put that as a skill that somebody has to master.
Perfect. And out of the 4 that you've listed in your framework, strategic planning, accountability, communication, and collaboration, are there any of these which particularly apply to more senior roles versus more junior roles, or is it something that you look for across a broad spectrum of all candidates that you see in terms of seniority?
Yeah, that's also a very good question. I think as you are junior, some of the things are expected from you. I think accountability is expected. Accountability is the bucket where I would club execution, which means you are given a problem, you show the accountability and the persistence to actually see that problem, get it built, deployed, launch it. Communication is something that comes with time. If I was to stack rank it in terms of most junior to most senior, I would say accountability, then I would say collaboration, and then I would say strategic planning, communication, right? Because if you think about CEOs, presidents, big leaders, they probably aren't really planning anything. Probably they have people helping them do it, but they are responsible for communicating the ideas.
Yeah.
Right. When you are very new in your career, you are probably not expected to come up with a 3-5 year vision of what your product is. It's just probably you don't have the context.
Perfect. So should we move on to the second part of your leadership product stack that you've chosen to highlight? And I think this is to do with you mentioned, frameworks that you use to rally cross-functional orgs. So maybe you could talk a little bit about what's in your product stack regarding, rallying cross-functional teams, cross-functional orgs. How big is Shipt, by the way, in terms of number of people?
Last I checked, it was close to 3,000 people.
Oh, wow. Okay. It's pretty big.
It's fairly large. Yeah. When you get to a company of that size, there are specialized roles in the company. There's data science, there's operations, there's engineering, there's design, there's product, and we also work with legal, with finance. When there are so many functions, what happens in big organizations is that different people might find different ideas, and it might be that some other team is now pursuing a different goal. They may not be in sync at the same instance in time. If all of these people had one rallying cry, had one mission, had one goal, or had something where they could all align and they could actually all go at it together. If there's an operations team, if there is an algorithm and engineering team, if both of them are trying to solve the same problem, it really creates a huge synergy in the company. But getting that, agreeing on that one goal, it's not an easy problem to solve, especially in fast-moving companies, because different teams see different parts of the company and different problems. There might be some external audits or challenges that the legal team might see and come back to the product team and say, we want you to fix this. Customer support might say that we want you to fix this. So the goals of different teams could get out of sync at the same point in time because different teams cater to different parts of the businesses.
Yeah.
The one common thread that I have found extremely useful in rallying everybody across a common goal, across a common mission, is OKRs. OKRs are a system that started at Intel. There's a famous CEO from Intel. His name is Andy Grove, and he really instituted the culture of OKRs at the company. One of the biggest companies where OKRs are used consistently is Google. So Google was the one where they really became tech pop culture, if you will. At the scale of a company like Google with hundreds of thousands of employees, you need a framework where you can actually make progress because there are so many groups and so many specializations within the company. How do you have a common rallying cry? OKRs stand for objectives and key results. Just to simplify and give you a simple example, an objective could be, I want to reduce incoming calls for customer service. And a key result could be that today for every 100 orders, I get calls for 10 orders. So it's a 10% rate. I want to reduce that to 5%. And you put a time around it. So you say, I want to do that by March of next year, right? An objective is to use the number of calls. Key results is what is your baseline and when you are actually reducing it to. And then there is a timeline. This framework, as simple as it sounds, agreeing on the what, which is what metric or what goal are you actually trying to hit. When you have these shared OKRs across companies, across different teams, it is extremely synergistic. Imagine if everybody at the company was trying to reduce calls coming to customer service. There was an operations team, there's a customer support team, there's a product team, there is a communications team. And if that team agrees with this goal, they might write articles for some common things that are coming back to the customer service. Generally needs a lot of policy and buy-in from leaders. Generally what happens is, companies have top line goals. We want to grow the business by X%. We want to increase profit by Y%. The way planning works, you have that there. You have these burning problems at the teams which are closest to the problems. And so they get this top level guidance and you have your burning problems at the bottom. And you try to figure out how can you reconcile the two. In good companies, it is a democratic process, which is with guidance coming from the top level of the company. People who are closer to the problems at the bottom, they have the agency and they are fully empowered to come up with what solutions make sense at the bottom because they are closest to the problems.
Okay, cool. And is there a specific process that you follow to arrive at what your OKRs should be for each of these cross-functional groups?
So the process is very simple. I would encourage the people in your audience to read a book. It's called Measure What Matters. It's by this industry legend. His name is John Doerr. He was with Andy at Intel, and he brought the system of OKRs into Google. He gives an example of what different teams, how they actually went about implementing OKRs in different teams, and like a machine learning team versus Google search. So there are examples there. Yeah. But generally, this framework is self-explanatory. As I told you, there is an objective, there is a metric that you're trying to change, and then there is a time frame within which you're actually trying to meet that objective. It's as simple as that. Now, the framework that we follow is to be lightweight. So every quarter we set OKRs, and then at the end of the quarter, we have a review cycle where we go and look at how did we do versus our previous quarter goals that we set. And then we go and rinse and repeat. It's supposed to be a very easy to follow process. Where it is the most challenging is for everybody to agree that these are the goals where all the teams are going to rally around those goals and sign up for those goals and actually continue doing that month after month after month. Some of the OKRs, for example, might be the year-long OKR. Some things just don't change very fast. Some things can change fast. Some things just don't change very fast. saying that, I was at 10%, now I am at 15, I want to go from 15 to 18, 18 to 20. So the targets will keep changing, the goal will probably not change.
And I guess the tricky thing from a product perspective when you're working with OKRs is to fit, and with a long-term OKR like you mentioned, is to figure out, okay, at what point have we optimized this metric as far as we think is humanly possible, and now it's time to move on to something else, because
to something else. Great point. That's a great point. It's a great point.
I don't know if you've got any personal experience of examples of where you've had to do that, or of some of the thought process you might go through to think, oh, do you know what, we've reached a point where we've optimized this to where we're happy, now we're going to move on to something else. But it's I guess something you develop over time, isn't it?
One of the learnings from the book is that you should absolutely not punish yourself if you're not able to meet them. In fact, they are supposed to be aspirational and stretch. So the green zone of an OKR is 70% or more. If you have achieved 100% of an OKR, if you've beaten that metric, then basically you have just really underpromised. You have not stretched yourself enough as a team. That means you need to aim higher. Between 70% to 100%, you should be, as a team, you should be able to get to 70%, and how you regularly do it. But to get between 70 to 100%, you have to push yourself. You have to go beyond the normal work that you do. If you are, constantly blowing up 100%, then you're basically just always playing this promise lower but deliver higher game, right? It's good probably for external optics if you're reporting to Wall Street. That's good. But internally, you want to be more aspirational and aggressive and push yourself, right? So it is upon leaders to have that education of what good means, how other companies do it, what are the industry benchmarks, and then guide your team and your organizations to actually set aspirational OKRs.
And where do you sit? I know there's a bit of a debate around whether you should be more data led or data informed, and I guess OKRs are almost the embodiment of a data led organization where you're aggressively chasing metrics. But then people who argue not against it, but people who throw a bit of caution to the argument, they say, well, if we become obsessed with achieving these metrics, then that may be to the detriment of the user experience. And some people often talk about maybe some examples, like I think the Netflix auto playing. It's like, okay, well, clearly the teams there have been tasked with increasing the number of minutes viewed per session or something like that. But actually, some users have said that when you hover over an image of a video, you don't necessarily want it to play. It's quite annoying. So I guess it's difficult, isn't it? I guess as a product person to balance everything. But I wondered what your thoughts were on the data-led versus data-informed debate.
That's a very insightful question that you asked. First of all, you don't know what you don't know. When you're looking at data, one of the pitfalls that can happen is that you can fall into confirmation bias. In other words, you are trying to find answers where they don't exist, and you're trying to put numbers to get to a certain outcome to reinforce what you already believe. Confirmation bias is real. But to what you said, that is one type of OKR that I talked about. There are different types. The other type of OKR is you are truly launching a 0 to 1 problem. The one that you talked about was more like a quality sprint, right? UI sucks. Our numbers are not going to be a leading indicator of public sentiment. They will tell us the fact when people leave that your product quality sucks, but by that time it's already too late. So what you want to do is you definitely want to bring a qualitative signal as part of when you're building the product versus waiting and trying to infer all of that through your data at the end. You're absolutely right that there is a quality angle to it besides just being completely metrics driven. There are generally 3 types of OKRs. One OKR is what I described is almost like an improvement OKR, which is you are at X, you want to change that to Y. There is another one which is a 0 to 1 OKR. So you don't even have a product right now and you're looking to launch something new. So you don't have any data, you don't have a baseline. Then the goal becomes launching this and maybe reaching a certain number of users using the product. And then you put a time frame around that. So that is a 0 to 1. And then the third one is what you said is a quality sprint, which is not a quantitative driven OKR. You can still put some number on it. And I think it's generally a good idea. One of the things in that book, Measure What Matters, or one of the dictums of working in the tech industry generally is that you cannot improve what you cannot measure. One of the things that I worry about a lot when we make changes to our user experience, for example, you have to have some intuition or some benchmark of what problem you're trying to solve. And the reason being, anytime you change user experience, there is a learning curve. No matter how good you are, there is a non-zero risk that you're making it worse for somebody. And you would not know that unless you actually have a way of measuring what the current baseline is. You run feedback, you run a survey, you probably talk to customers, you should have a signal. where you say that that signal will actually help me understand whether when I make the change, whether it has made things better for the user or it has made things worse for them.
Yeah.
So there is something that you should measure, is my general sentiment, versus I think this is a better design experience, therefore I should do it. I'll give you a very simple anecdote. Back at Zynga, I worked for Words with Friends. One of the features I worked on was a level progression game. What you're doing is you're playing Scrabble with the computer. So there's an algorithm, you make a word, the computer makes a word, and so on. If you win that level, you go to the next level, and it gets harder and harder as you go to higher and higher levels. So what we did was, just like every other game, we had sort of a gating mechanic. So if you wanted to go from one level to the other, you could wait for a couple of hours, or you could pay money to unlock that and you could actually play. A lot of games have this thing like an energy mechanic. And the reason they do that is they don't want to blow through the entire content in one go. They want you to come back and play the game over and over again. It's just like with Netflix, right? If you watch too much of it, you can actually get burnt out. So Netflix has for example, a prompt built in, which is, are you still watching? Do you want us to continue playing? I don't know if you've noticed this, but after a few hours, there is a prompt where they try to actually, kick you out, and you have to push a button to say. So there are guardrails like that built into every product. So we had that. We had a button where the user could click it and they could actually go to the next level and unlock if they wanted to. The button was green in color and it had a dollar symbol on it. And the idea was that you had coins in the game and you would spend a certain amount of virtual currency to unlock the next level. Now, what happened was, this is something that data will never tell you. We had an observation room where all the team would sit behind a one-way mirror. And we would call live players, we would observe them playing the game and see their reaction. One of the players actually was pushing that button, and he went into the game and he was like, oh, what happened? I don't see anything. And so the interviewer in the room was confused. And she was like, what do you mean you don't see anything? He was like, oh, I just pushed a button with a dollar sign. I was expecting a payout. I thought when I click that button, I would actually get dollars. Like, I don't know what happened. I see that my wallet has gone down. Like, this is very non-intuitive. So we had no idea. Like, you have no idea. Data will never tell you things like this. You actually have to go and see how the product works in the real world to be able to understand these type of things. So that happens.
That's so funny. Yeah, I think maybe it's to do with the color green. You associate it with maybe being paid or something.
Maybe.
Maybe
a color red would have been better.
Yeah, the emotion. Yeah, the emotion doesn't match the actual action there, doesn't it? It should be red. You're going to be losing money.
Exactly. But then the problem is, does anybody want to click on a red button? That is the other problem, right?
Yeah, exactly. Maybe blue. I don't know. Maybe a different color. Okay, perfect. Thanks very much for that overview on OKRs. That's really helpful. Shall we move on to the final area of your leadership product stack that you've chosen to share with us today?
Sure. Yeah. Let's do that.
Okay, perfect. So the final area is about the best processes and frameworks for developing your product and achieving your outcomes. And I think you've highlighted experimentation for incrementally launching products as a framework or as a principle of working in terms of your product stack. So do you want to talk us a bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. For all the budding PMs in your audience, the two skills that I would strongly recommend people to build is, one is you need to be very comfortable with data. Learn SQL, empower yourself to be able to pull data in a company. But the second thing is I like my product managers to be hunters and not farmers. So you go and hunt for diamonds. So yes, you found a diamond, but a large part of a beautiful, brilliant diamond is not just finding the raw diamond, it's actually polishing and making it attractive. So you launch a product, that is almost 50% of the journey. I think the main challenges come when now you're actually truly trying to find this product market fit. You have launched something which you know that a certain percent of your population is going to use it. How do you make it better for all the others who are not actually using it? And a lot of that is actually incremental product polishing, product development, just grinding the product, right? Like just like you would polish a diamond.
Yeah.
And you can extend that thesis, that idea into everything that you essentially do. So everything that you do in your product, from big ideas to small, you should actually think of them sort of as an experiment. It's a way of thinking. It's less about actually running an experiment. Yes, there are techniques of running an experiment, but it's more about that approach, that mentality of thinking of everything as an experiment and being able to make decisions based on what you see as an outcome of an experiment, if you will. With experimentation, you will empower yourself to learn statistics. One of the classic techniques of experimentation is something called an A/B test. An A/B test is very simple. You have something that is unchanged,
and then you have something which is changed. So let's say, for example, we talked about the green button. Let's say that, you run an A/B test where maybe there are people who click on that button once or twice, but after some time they get confused and they just drop out because they feel like you're trying to cheat them because they expected a payout, but you actually charge them for playing that level. And so you might want to run an A/B test where you might decide maybe the button should be red, maybe the button should be blue. So those could be two variants of that button. And you might want to try, on 5% of the people who play that game, they see the blue version. On another 5%, they see the red version. And the remaining 90% see the green, which is the status quo. There is a famous example of this in Gmail. Just to tell you guys how powerful this is, Gmail, if I recall correctly, tested something like 250 versions of the background color blue in Gmail. The hyperlinks were a certain color in the browser. They highlighted the hyperlinks a little bit more. Just by changing that, it sounds like a very, very tedious 250 versions of blue. Like, it sounds like nuts. But that experiment, if I recall correctly, right, it probably gave them a lift of something like $500 million at that stage. Just by picking the right color of blue. Right?
Yeah, so, I think that was a Marissa Mayer. I think that was a Marissa Mayer story when she was there, was one of the first PMs. And I guess, as you said, that with products that have got such a large reach, these tiny changes can have such a massive impact. But then I guess the flip side of that is, if you're a really small startup, I guess if you don't have the scale, then perhaps there's less value in A/B testing. I wonder, because if you haven't got product market fit yet, and you're spending all of your time doing A/B tests, that's probably not a great way to be spending your time. And also, you may never get statistically significant results if you just don't have the sheer scale.
So you may not achieve statistical significance quickly. If you have scale, companies like Amazon, if they try a new order flow, for example, they might achieve statistical significance in minutes. Because they're getting millions of orders, every minute. They might be able to see the difference between one color versus the other. Or if you don't have that scale, you may just have to wait longer. Because you will eventually get it, given that you have a non-zero conversion rate. At some point, you would actually be able to measure it. That is sort of the art and the science. Founders, for example, have strong intuition about what would work, what would not work. And a lot of times that is based out of a lot of these experiments that they have done before. Or they have mentors, or they have somebody who might be able to tell them that this looks like this will work or may not work. So at the start, to get over the hump, like when you don't have enough adoption, you might actually rely on intuition. But at some point, like I said, I will use that analogy of polishing the diamond, right? Buying 250 shades of blue and finding the right one to give you a $500 million lift is actually polishing the diamond. That's what that is. You've already found the diamond at this point, right? It sounds very tedious. When I was a PM early on in my career, right, I also felt like, why are we running an experiment? This seems like a big waste of time, to be completely candid. But actually, I saw the value of making those incremental changes over time, because it really, truly matters. Especially when you have products which are international, when the same thing is being used in 37 countries and 67 languages, and you want to get the copyright and all of that. You want a machine to be able to help you figure out different combinations of these things and be able to say, like, this is the combination that is the least confusing to the users. And it matters. Little changes like this in user experience, like little things like these, make a big difference. So,
And for people who are listening and they're thinking to themselves, you know what, I want to be, maybe they're new to product management and they're thinking, I want to become a bit more experimental in my thought process. I want to think more experimentally. Have you got any kind of tips or tools as to kind of practically how you can do that, or any resources that you would recommend that people check out just to become a bit more of an experimental thinker or an incremental builder?
Yeah, a shameless plug here. I have a podcast which is called Marketplace Experimentation 0 to 1.
Okay.
And it actually takes an offline use case. So imagine that you're a bookseller with stores in New York, California, and Washington. Assume you have a certain number of sales per week, and you want to use experiments to increase the number of sales. What are different techniques available out there? There are books in experimentation, but the challenge is it does remain in the domain of people with some expertise in math, expertise in statistics. Like, you need to be able to understand p-values, what is alpha versus beta, what is the distribution of the incoming, not to geek out too much, but you need to understand all of that. But ultimately for PMs, what matters is, what do you do with it? How do you make decisions? And how do you avoid making wrong decisions? How do you avoid false positives? How do you avoid false negatives? If you're not seeing a result, how do you know that there isn't something there?
Well, we'll put that in the show notes. I think people will find that really interesting. Thanks very much. Okay, perfect. So yeah, we've covered your product stack as a leader, and one of the ways we're kind of ending the each episode is to ask people, outside of the things that you've highlighted in your product stack, are there any tools or products that you use on a day-to-day basis that you couldn't live without? So I just wondered if you've got any products or tools that spring to mind, really.
One of the ones that I live by all the time is Google Calendar.
Okay.
I need something to schedule me and my life. I'm just not good at remembering birthdays, remembering personal appointments, remembering, professional things. I just rely on that on my phone, on my computer, wherever I am. So that's super useful for me. The other one is I'm a fitness nut, and I
Okay.
am also addicted to my Peloton, which I got during COVID. So
Okay.
those are the two things that I can't live without right now.
Okay, perfect. And what with Peloton, I've never actually used it myself. Do you use the bike, or have they got other products now, or like
Yeah, I use the
bike?
bike. There is an app, and you can do things like meditation and running. You can run outside. There are
Yeah.
other programs out there, but in terms of equipment, I'm not a Peloton salesman, but I'll say this. The latest one that they have is a rower. So they introduced Peloton Row.
Okay.
But they had a bike and a treadmill before. So
Yeah.
I have the classic bike. That's where the word Peloton comes from. When you're biking, that formation is called a Peloton.
So you schedule a Peloton session in your Google Calendar to make sure that you keep fit at work, maybe?
Not really. I just find
Sure.
empty slots in my calendar, and I just go and jump on the Peloton because it's all on demand.
Because they have live classes, don't they? Have classes that you
They
can
have
join.
live classes.
Yeah, yeah.
It's all on demand. You can just get on the bike and you can find something you like and just go at it for a little bit. So.
Perfect. Well, Vishal, thanks very much for spending some time with us today and talking us through your product stacks from a leadership perspective. It's been really, really interesting, really insightful, and hopefully everyone listening has found it interesting as well. So thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Richard. And if anybody wants to get in touch with me, my LinkedIn is LinkedIn/in/VEE. V. So if anybody wants to connect and have any questions, I'm happy to connect and answer. Thank you so much for having me. This was such a pleasure.